In 2013, a college student named Amber lived in a small off-campus apartment. She shared the space with another student, Maddie, who was quiet, reclusive, and kept to herself most of the time. Amber thought it was a bit strange that Maddie was so introverted, but she didn't think too much about it. One night, Amber woke up around 2 a.m. to the sound of whispering. She thought Maddie might be on the phone, but the whispering sounded like it was coming from all around her. It was soft, unintelligible, and eerie. She checked her phone to see if she had accidentally left a video playing, but it was off. She looked around the room but found nothing unusual. Amber was spooked but managed to fall back asleep eventually. A few days later, the whispering returned, but this time it was louder and seemed to be coming from the walls. Amber was freaked out and decided to confront Maddie about it the next morning. When she did, Maddie looked at her with wide eyes and said she hadn't heard anything. She suggested that Amber might be having nightmares. As weeks went by, the whispering continued, growing more frequent and intense. Amber began to feel watched even during the day. She started to notice things in her apartment were being moved around or went missing. One night, as the whispering grew louder than ever, Amber decided she'd had enough. She packed her bags and went to stay with a friend. The next day, Amber and her friend went back to the apartment to get the rest of her things. When they opened the door, they were greeted by the stench of rotting food. The place was a mess with garbage strewn everywhere. Maddie was nowhere to be found. Alarmed, Amber called the landlord, who came over with a spare key to Maddie's room. What they found inside Maddie's room was chilling. The walls were covered with strange symbols and phrases written in what looked like blood. There were candles everywhere, and the room was filled with a sickly sweet smell. In the corner of the room, they found a small, makeshift shrine with photos of Amber. Some photos were recent, taken without her knowledge. There were locks of her hair and items that had gone missing from her room. Terrified, Amber immediately called the police. An investigation revealed that Maddie wasn't a student at all, but someone who had assumed a false identity. She had been stalking Amber for months. Maddie was eventually caught and arrested, but the experience left Amber traumatized. Amber moved out of the apartment and never heard from Maddie again. To this day, she can't shake the feeling of being watched, and the memory of those whispers haunts her dreams. After moving out of the apartment, Amber tried to return to a sense of normalcy. She found a new place to live, closer to campus and with new roommates who were genuinely friendly and welcoming. However, the trauma of what had happened with Maddie lingered. Amber struggled with insomnia, frequently waking up in the middle of the night convinced she could hear the whispering again. One evening, as Amber was unpacking some boxes, she found an old journal that Maddie had given her as a gift. She had never used it, thinking it was just a friendly gesture at the time. Now, with everything that had happened, she hesitated before opening it. But curiosity got the better of her, and she flipped through the pages. To her surprise, the journal wasn't empty. There were notes, sketches, and strange symbols scattered throughout. Some pages had detailed descriptions of Amber's daily routines, her favorite places to visit, her friends, and even private conversations she had with them. Maddie had documented everything meticulously. As Amber read through the journal, she felt a deep sense of violation and fear. Among the pages, Amber found a key taped to one of the back covers. It was small and old, with no indication of what it might unlock. She decided to take it to the police, hoping it could provide more clues about Maddie's true identity or intentions. The police took the journal and the key for further investigation. A few days later, Detective Parker, who was handling Amber's case, called her in for a meeting. He had discovered something disturbing. The key was traced back to a storage unit on the outskirts of the city, rented under another alias connected to Maddie. Amber and Detective Parker went to the storage unit together. As they opened it, a wave of dread washed over Amber. Inside, they found more of Maddie's disturbing collections. There were shelves lined with jars containing odd trinkets, hair, and personal items belonging to various people. There were also more photographs, not just of Amber, but of other individuals who seemed to be unaware they were being watched. In the corner of the storage unit, there was a large trunk. Inside, they found a collection of Maddie's journals, each documenting a different person she had stalked over the years. Amber's name was on the most recent one, but there were others, some dating back over a decade. The discovery of the storage unit led to a deeper investigation into Maddie's past. It turned out that Maddie had been stalking people for years, moving from place to place, assuming new identities, and becoming increasingly obsessive and dangerous. The police managed to track down some of her previous victims, who shared similar stories of being watched, harassed, and having their personal spaces invaded. With the new evidence, Maddie was charged with multiple counts of stalking, breaking and entering, and other crimes. She was sentenced to a lengthy prison term, but for Amber, the ordeal was far from over. The psychological scars remained. Amber decided to seek therapy to help her cope with the trauma. It was a long and difficult process, but over time, she began to regain a sense of control over her life. She became more cautious about who she let into her life and took steps to protect her privacy. Years later, Amber graduated and moved to a new city for a fresh start. She rarely spoke of Maddie or the horrors she experienced, but she never forgot the lessons she learned. She became an advocate for victims of stalking and harassment, using her story to raise awareness and help others. While the memories of Maddie's whispering still haunted her dreams, Amber found strength in her survival and the knowledge that she had helped put an end to Maddie's reign of terror. The silent roommate was gone, but the fight for safety and awareness continued. Amber's new life in the city was a fresh start. She found a job she loved, made new friends, and even started dating again. Yet, the shadow of Maddie's obsession was never far from her mind. She was vigilant about her surroundings, always on guard for signs of anything unusual. One crisp autumn evening, Amber was enjoying dinner with her new boyfriend, Jake. They laughed and talked, their conversation a comforting normalcy she had longed for. As they left the restaurant, Amber felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. However, as they walked to their car, Amber noticed a figure standing across the street, partially obscured by a tree. The figure was watching them intently. Her heart raced as she tightened her grip on Jake's hand. He noticed her tension and asked if everything was okay. Amber glanced back at the figure, but it was gone. She shook her head, convincing herself it was just her paranoia. They drove home in silence, but Amber couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in her chest. That night, Amber lay in bed, her mind racing. She decided to check the locks one more time just to be sure. As she moved through the apartment, she saw a shadow pass by the window. She froze, her breath catching in her throat. Summoning her courage, she peeked through the blinds. Nothing, just the empty street illuminated by the dim glow of the streetlights. The next morning, Amber received a call from Detective Parker. He had been following up on some loose ends regarding Maddie's case. There were unsettling developments. Maddie had been corresponding with someone from prison, someone who seemed to share her obsessions. The letters were cryptic but suggested that this person might try to continue Maddie's work. Amber's heart sank. She had hoped that with Maddie's incarceration, she could finally leave the nightmare behind. But now it seemed that another threat was looming. Detective Parker advised her to be cautious and promised to keep her updated. Days turned into weeks, and Amber's paranoia grew. She saw shadows where there were none, heard whispers that couldn't be real. Jake noticed the change in her and tried to comfort her, but the stress was taking its toll on their relationship. One evening, Amber decided to take a walk to clear her head. As she walked through the park, she felt a presence behind her. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her ears. The footsteps behind her matched her speed. She broke into a run, not daring to look back until she reached a well-lit area. When she finally turned, there was no one there. Breathless and terrified, Amber called Detective Parker. He arrived shortly after, accompanied by a patrol officer. They searched the park but found no sign of anyone. Parker assured her they would increase patrols in her neighborhood and advised her to stay with friends or family if possible. Amber decided to take Parker's advice. She packed a bag and went to stay with Jake for a while. He was supportive, but the strain of the situation was evident. One night, as they sat watching TV, Jake went to get some snacks from the kitchen. Amber glanced at her phone and saw a notification from an unknown number. It was a text message. "I see you." Panic surged through her as she showed Jake the message. He immediately called the police. They arrived quickly, but there was little they could do other than file a report and advise Amber to change her number. The fear that had become her constant companion intensified. The following days were a blur of anxiety and sleepless nights. Amber was haunted by the feeling that someone was always watching her. Then, one evening, as she was preparing dinner, she heard a noise outside the window. She looked out and saw a face staring back at her. It was a woman, with eyes filled with a cold, calculating malice. Amber screamed, and Jake rushed to her side. By the time he got to the window, the woman was gone. They called the police again, and this time they managed to find a set of footprints leading away from the house. Detective Parker arrived and assured them they were doing everything they could to catch this new stalker. Feeling trapped and terrified, Amber knew she couldn't live like this anymore. She decided to take matters into her own hands. She began researching self-defense classes and installed a state-of-the-art security system in Jake's house. She even got a guard dog for extra protection. One night, as she was reviewing the security footage, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The woman who had been stalking her was caught on camera, standing in the backyard, staring directly at the camera with a sinister smile. Amber called Detective Parker, who arrived with a team to analyze the footage. They enhanced the image and discovered that the woman was someone from Maddie's past, another obsessed follower who had taken up Maddie's mantle. With this new lead, the police were able to track down the woman. Her name was Rebecca, and she had a history of mental illness and a criminal record. She was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. Amber finally felt a sense of relief. Rebecca's arrest meant she could start to rebuild her life without fear. She continued her self-defense classes, maintained her security measures, and slowly began to reclaim her sense of normalcy. Years later, Amber became an advocate for stalking victims, sharing her story to raise awareness and support others going through similar experiences. She found strength in her survival and used her experiences to help others find their own courage. While the memories of Maddie and Rebecca would always be with her, Amber had finally found a way to move forward, turning her fear into a source of empowerment and hope for others. Years passed, and Amber became well known as an advocate for victims of stalking. She traveled the country, giving talks and workshops on how to protect oneself and seek help. She found fulfillment in her work, knowing she was making a difference. One day, after a particularly moving talk, Amber was approached by a young woman named Lily. Lily was visibly shaken and confided in Amber that she believed she was being stalked. The details of Lily's story were eerily similar to Amber's experiences with Maddie and Rebecca. Amber took Lily under her wing, offering her guidance and support. As Amber helped Lily navigate the legal and emotional challenges of dealing with a stalker, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. She began to notice little things: anonymous emails, strange phone calls, and unexpected deliveries to her office. It seemed as though someone was trying to get into her head again. One evening, as Amber was going through her emails, she received a message from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You can't escape us." Her heart pounded as she opened the email. It contained a single sentence: "We will always be watching." Attached was a photo of Amber giving one of her talks, taken from the audience. Amber immediately contacted Detective Parker, who had become a trusted friend over the years. He assured her they would investigate the email and try to trace its origin. In the meantime, he advised her to remain vigilant and to stay in touch with her security detail. The next day, Amber received another disturbing message, this time in the form of a handwritten note slipped under her office door. It read, "We are many. We are everywhere." Amber's anxiety skyrocketed. She wondered if there was a network of stalkers who had been following her movements, inspired by Maddie and Rebecca. Amber and Lily decided to stay together for safety. They installed more security cameras around Amber's house and kept in close contact with the police. Despite these measures, the feeling of being watched persisted. One night, Amber's dog began barking furiously at the front door. Amber and Lily checked the security monitors and saw a hooded figure standing just outside. The figure quickly disappeared, but the sense of dread lingered. They called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no trace of the intruder. Days turned into weeks, and the harassment continued. Amber's advocacy work took a toll on her mental health, but she refused to back down. She knew she had to stay strong, not just for herself but for all the victims she was helping. One evening, Amber received a call from Detective Parker. He had news. The police had managed to trace the anonymous emails and phone calls to a former colleague of Maddie and Rebecca's. This person, a man named Derek, had been infatuated with Maddie and had vowed to continue her legacy after her arrest. Derek had been recruiting like-minded individuals online, creating a network of stalkers who idolized Maddie's methods. The police launched a coordinated operation to apprehend Derek and dismantle his network. They arrested several individuals connected to him, and Derek himself was taken into custody. The relief Amber felt was immense. She hoped that with Derek and his followers behind bars, she could finally find peace. As the months passed, the harassment ceased. Amber and Lily began to feel safe again. Amber's advocacy work flourished, and she continued to help others while maintaining her own security. One sunny afternoon, Amber received a letter in the mail. It had no return address, but the handwriting was familiar. She opened it cautiously. Inside was a single piece of paper with the words, "The shadows never rest. Be vigilant." Amber's heart sank, but she quickly steeled herself. She knew that the fight against stalking and harassment was never truly over. She would always have to be on guard, but she also knew she had the strength and resilience to face whatever came her way. Amber continued her work with renewed determination, knowing that her story was a beacon of hope for others. She had turned her fear into power, and she would never let the shadows win. Amber's resolve remained unshaken, but the cryptic letter served as a grim reminder that the threat was never entirely gone. She doubled down on her efforts to raise awareness, incorporating her latest experiences into her talks. The knowledge that she was still being targeted made her message even more urgent. One evening, after returning from a particularly successful seminar, Amber found another letter waiting for her at home. It read, "You may have defeated us, but the darkness has many faces." The message sent chills down her spine. Amber knew she had to take her security to the next level. She reached out to a private security firm specializing in high-profile cases of stalking and harassment. The firm, led by a seasoned professional named Jack, installed advanced surveillance systems and assigned a team to monitor Amber's home and movements around the clock. Despite the heightened security, Amber couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. One night, Amber and Lily decided to unwind with a movie. As they settled in, the power suddenly went out, plunging the house into darkness. Amber's dog, usually calm, started growling and barking at the front door. Lily grabbed a flashlight while Amber checked her phone to call for help. The line was dead, no signal. Amber and Lily moved cautiously towards the front door, their hearts pounding. They could hear faint footsteps outside. Amber's mind raced. Was this another one of Derek's followers? Or was it something even more sinister? Just as they reached the door, the power came back on, and the phone signal returned. Amber quickly called Detective Parker, who assured her that a patrol car was on the way. When the police arrived, they found no signs of forced entry or anyone nearby. However, they discovered a single, chilling message written on the doorstep in chalk. "We are closer than you think." This new incident pushed Amber to her breaking point. She decided it was time to take a more proactive approach. With the help of Jack and his team, Amber started conducting her own investigation. They pored over the evidence, tracing every lead, and scrutinizing her past encounters for any overlooked clues. One of Jack's team members, a tech expert named Sarah, managed to hack into a hidden online forum where Derek's followers communicated. What they found was disturbing. Detailed plans of their activities, discussions about Amber's movements, and even a list of potential targets. Amber was horrified to see that Lily's name was on the list. She knew they had to act fast to protect her friend. They coordinated with the police to track down and arrest the remaining members of the network. Each arrest brought Amber a step closer to safety, but she knew the true mastermind was still out there. Late one night, while reviewing surveillance footage, Amber noticed a figure that seemed out of place. It was a woman, dressed in dark clothing, lurking near the edge of the property. Amber's blood ran cold. She recognized the woman from her talks. She had been in the audience, always sitting at the back, always leaving quickly. Amber alerted Jack, who immediately dispatched his team to secure the area. They managed to apprehend the woman, who was identified as Elena, a devoted follower of Maddie and Derek. Elena confessed to being part of a larger, more secretive group dedicated to continuing Maddie's legacy. They called themselves the Watchers. With Elena in custody, Amber felt a temporary sense of relief, but she knew the battle was far from over. The Watchers were more organized and determined than any group she had encountered before. They had resources, anonymity, and a fanatical belief in their mission. Amber decided to take her advocacy to a new level. She collaborated with cybersecurity experts, law enforcement agencies, and mental health professionals to create a comprehensive program aimed at identifying and dismantling stalking networks. She traveled the country, sharing her story and the new insights she had gained. Despite the ongoing threat, Amber refused to live in fear. She had transformed from a victim into a warrior, using her experiences to empower others and fight back against the darkness. She knew that the shadows would always be there, lurking at the edges of her life, but she had the strength and the allies to face them head-on. One evening, after returning from a successful seminar, Amber received a final letter. This one was different. It was unsigned, but the message was clear. You have inspired many. We are watching, but we are also learning. Your courage is our greatest enemy. Amber smiled. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of peace. She knew the fight would continue, but she also knew she wasn't alone. She had created a community of survivors, advocates, and fighters, all united against the darkness. The shadows might never rest, but neither would she. Amber turned off the lights, hugged her dog, and settled into bed. As she drifted off to sleep, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle was far from over, but she was ready for whatever came next. The Watchers had underestimated her strength, and now she was stronger than ever.